neurons in primate brains, and the decision-making process of swarms in selecting the next hive site. Makes a very, very compelling argument that they are isomorphic.
Right on. Well, I
Yeah.
went ahead and started the stream, so we can get started.
All right, let's get rocking. We have so much to talk about. I want to thank everyone who came out to the developer conference. It was a roaring success by all accounts. Especially want to thank Kelly and Meta and Cody and Nash and all the people who helped put the conference together. It went off without a hitch, and there was a lot of I think people felt really relaxed and empowered and ready to do their best work. So I was really, really happy about what happened there, and I think a lot of people were and came away feeling very inspired. So thanks to everyone for such a successful conference. Also to Christian, who did a great job on the streaming effort. That was really remarkable as well. And I think we have a good record of the event. So actually there were several talks I could not attend to because I was triple booked, but I'm looking forward to being able to watch them on YouTube. Okay, so with that, do we have Meta online? Do we want to have a technical update?
I'm here. Good morning.
Awesome. Good morning. Take it away, Meta.
All right. So happy to report some metrics on release status. So node, the R node on Docker Hub, we have up to 388 polls. So I think the conference was a huge success. I think we've got a lot of traction on the node image itself and a lot more people interacting with the node. So very exciting. That's a new high. We ended, when we went into the .2 release, we had 110 polls. So almost, triple the previous polls combined with this .2 release. So very exciting. And I'm sure we'll see even more traction with .3. So really glad to hear that. Node 0.3 release is on track. And Node 0.4 and 0.5 release plans have been signed off. And for those of you that attended the developer conference, either virtually or in person, you saw me present those release plans. So if you are not familiar with what's in those release plans, please get on our wiki page, go to developer.rchain.coop, and you'll see a link to the release plans directly from that site. So that makes it really easy for everyone to interact with those release plans. Specifications for testnet and the mininet are complete. And in fact, I'm pleased to report that we have done some work where we have a push button instantiation of n number of nodes on demand. So that's really important for development testing. As we want to get into rapid development and testing process, we will need infrastructure running for n number of nodes to start testing these internode type features such as consensus and transactions in the blockchain. So this really facilitates that work. And that was part of the Node.3 release so that the consensus team can test their piece. We are hiring sysadmins to support the launch of the testnet and mainnet. I posted this in the Discord and the node testing and developers channel. If you know of any sysadmins that are looking to either break into the mining space or wanting to be an RChain node operator or are an existing system administrator but want to move into blockchain, go ahead and look at the pyrofx.net website. The job description is posted there, or send your email to jobs@pyrofx.net. We are looking to hire more than just one person for this role. So there's a few positions open. And it's quite urgent that we hire them. So we really need system administrators on this project. Status for the Rolang team. So the Rolang team, the consensus sub-team is working on integrating their Scala consensus with the communications API. There was a pair programming session with Pavel this morning to lock down the interface and the function calls. So that is moving along beautifully, and they will expect to be testing their implementation by tomorrow. They got to get it done by Friday so they can demo it internally Monday and then demo it to the community next week. We've implemented our Turan Oracle. That's the Cleek Safety Oracle. Those of you that have watched the consensus presentation on YouTube, either the recorded session or live stream, will know what that Cleek Safety Oracle is. And we've implemented methods in the interpreter, and we're moving on to other interpreter features that will be part of Node 3. The Node team, look forward, like I said, to the demo of our Node 0.3 this time next week. The release plan will outline the features that are in 0.3. We're specifying the Merkle-Patricia tree for the blockchain. So that is the tuple space, storage, and rollback piece that will be needed to support Node 5. We're starting the work on the communications enhancements related to the gRPC communications protocol and TLS. We're doing some investigation on the Ethereum compatibility. It is our desire to maintain compatibility with Ethereum keys. We need that for the ROC Rev swap, right? We want to make that as seamless as possible where people can use their Ethereum keys for Rev. Community participation. We've got some great community participation I'd like to report on in building a Python interface for the node, and then helping with systemd and installation features. This specific node work, so it's kind of cool. We've got some more community participation on another facet of the project, which is the node facet. And we will have a Python UI that will consume the gRPC interface. So, and I'm hoping that this Python UI will eventually blossom into a web interface for the node. As some of you may have heard, we want to expose all the gRPC functions via a very easy to use web interface right after the node is installed and started. The first thing that the user will do is navigate to their local host, and they'll be presented with a web interface where they can perform all of the rest of the configuration of the node in terms of joining a namespace, creating and or adding Rev to their wallet, et cetera, et cetera. So look forward to that. The Rosette team. So we discovered that we need to re-architect the virtual machine, and the team is researching and coming up with a plan this week. And the re-architecture is around objects that are currently part of the VM state, and we run into problems from this fact that we move mutable data that can be referenced by pointers in Rosette to something that is immutable. So Tim and Alex are going to be collaborating on coming up with a plan and approach for re-architecting the virtual machine. So my expectation is that I will have some documentation and a work plan from them in terms of what the big chunks are that need to get done and how long it will take. We've onboarded another community developer onto the VM project, and Abner has been invited to join our stand-up. So he joined the stand-up today for the first time. It's really cool, and very happy to see him really become an integral part of the team. His contributions have been really, really important. And so we've onboarded another community developer. So we've got now Abner and one other peer working on the primitive. So we've got 2 PRs that we merged from them this week on the primitive portion for the VM. Website, always check out developer.rchain.coop. We've got latest releases there available with documentation, tutorials, and links to software. And then a lot of people are using the node now. If you hit a bug or hit a problem, please do file tickets in our Jira. We are triaging those, and that way we can make sure that those issues are resolved in the subsequent release. So by all means, please do file bugs. If you run into issues, log those issues on the forums as well. I'm seeing more traction on the forums, which is terrific. It gives us a great single source of building a knowledge base around node and node operations for all users of rChain. So that buttons up my update. If there are questions, I'm happy to field them now.
Hey, Meta, did you get a chance to talk with Kumavis at the developers conference from MetaMask?
It's a blur. Those individuals that reached out to me, I've asked them to send me a Discord or an email. So,
okay.
yes. So if not, he should reach out to me.
And I'm pretty sure, Meta, you talked to him just after I did.
Is that
okay?
Kelly?
Yeah.
Yes, that's Kelly.
Okay. So the for everybody's reference here, MetaMask is one of the most popular interfaces for Ethereum, and Kumavis is the founder of that project and is very interested in rChain. Was at the conference but had a few things that would make his life a lot easier to integrate a light client for our chain. One of those things being libp2p. I can't remember what the other one is, but I'm sure you guys can coordinate to see what might be possible down the road to get some quick onboarding.
Terrific. Yeah, so I'll need to reach out to him. Do we have his handle? Can you send it to me?
Yeah, he's at Kumavis at everything, Kumvais. But I'll connect you via email, Meta.
That would be much better. Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, I spoke with Kumavis as well. He was very engaged at the conference, and we got some very positive feedback from him. So yeah, thanks for calling him out, Kenny. It was good to see him there. Awesome. So Meta, I'd like to do a deep dive into the re-architecture on the VM, but maybe we can do that at the next stand-up.
Yes, we can absolutely do that. And I think I'll give Tim and Alex some time to come away with some answers.
Okay, cool. Good. Awesome. So that's a great update. Is Kyle around? Because
I'm trying to get him. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm trying to get him right now.
Yeah,
Let me see if I can
let's
catch
see.
him.
While you're doing that, I'll also update the community that there's right now we have a nice vigorous debate going on the two sort of dominant sharding proposals. And I was hoping to do a sort of brief presentation on them today, but we might push it to next Wednesday. But I'm very pleased to see the level of engagement and debate over the two sharding proposals. I think a lot of people have good understandings of the trade-offs between the two different sharding proposals. Kent has done a nice write-up, and I'll try to make sure that that's public for everyone to read. Essentially, one is a tree-based proposal, which is roughly, you can think of it as like, if shards were like a Linux file system tree, that would be one way to think about it. And the other is a lattice-based proposal. Of which, the tree-based proposal would be a spanning tree. That's one way to think about it. So we're currently going through kind of the security and performance trade-offs in the two proposals, and I really want to make sure that the community is apprised of the different trade-offs and what we end up deciding, so no one is surprised and everyone kind of gets why we chose what we chose.
And Meta very much wants a decision by end of May at the absolute latest.
Oh yeah, no, we're hoping to have a decision by mid next week.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So there's a conversation. I think this Friday to kind of collect sort of final opinions on this, and then make a judgment call.
Kyle is here.
Awesome. So one of the great advantages of conferences like this is that we immerse ourselves and makes it more likely that we get lucky and have these flashes of insight. So Kyle had one of those and has a very, very lovely proposal, and I was hoping that Kyle might talk through what the proposal is in terms of an update to Erlang features that we could roll out within the Mercury timeframe. Kyle, you want to take it away?
Sure. Let me share my screen. All right. So the problem I was looking to solve is a problem that's been bugging me since we said that we wanted to run Erlang on the blockchain, which was, well, how do you define a transaction in a non-concurrent language? I was watching Mike talk about Rely Guarantee, and I realized that we can use pre and post conditions to enforce that kind of enforce transaction boundaries. And these don't behave like pre and post conditions in other kinds of languages because they're linear. But so, like example, if you look at the get here, in the presence of a write to method of the correct shape and a write to the state channel of the correct shape, then we necessarily reduce to a write, a replacement write to the state channel and a write to the return channel of the state value. So this is actually a fairly descriptive thing. So, you know, the nice thing would be if it doesn't reach that post state for whatever reason, we can roll back the read as if it didn't occur.
Which means that has a nice impact on the costing model, and allows us to explore the quiescence version of the costing model and a bunch of other things. One of the things I like about the proposal, Kyle, is that it's sort of, I mean, I really think of it as rely guarantee and not pre and post because the pre and post conditions are linear. But it's a subset of the usual rely guarantee in the sense that we don't have modal operators. You're just using the spatial operators, which and like rely guarantee in the presence of modal operators is super expressive, meaning that the dragons live in there, and there are many cases where we won't be able to terminate such a type check. But here you've bounded the expressiveness of the rely guarantee and found a pretty nice sweet spot in the sense that there's some clear, obvious wins, and yet it's still checkable, and in many cases it's checkable in finite time.
In this case, so in essence, you could think of it as an import as well. Basically, what happens is instead of evaluating a term in the global context soup, we want to constrain what we evaluate it with, and then run that particularly constrained environment down to quiescence. And then when we run it down to quiescence, we can check the post state. So that also places a constraint on which post states we're willing to check. The nice thing is like even on get, right? Like the get method, right? Like this write, if we waited until quiescence, we couldn't check that we were actually writing to the return value because there could be some linear for listing on that return channel that would have disappeared. So we want to check that like we're actually doing the right thing. And the way that you do that is you run it in a limited context.
Yeah, it's very nice, and I'm hoping that we can get this feature in the Mercury timeframe. So I think this is a great example of the kind of thing that can happen when we're all working together and immersed. You know, so suddenly these flashes of insights are more available. So thanks very much for presenting that. Do we have any other questions about the updates or the the technical development?
Is Rock to Rev considered a technical development?
It is an issue that we want to talk about on this Hangout. I want to circle back to that. So yeah, it is absolutely something we want to talk about. And thanks for bringing that up. Okay, and unless there's more, let's get updates from the firms that are helping us get applications on top of the platform. Greg, Lawrence, who wants to go first?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Again, an amazing conference. I walked away with 8 follow-up conversations from coffee, wine, a crypto bank, asset transfer and money management, minerals. So that was something you and I talked about, Greg. Minerals and mining, trust funds, to a host of other things, which I'll detail out as we got. There's a political action committee starting that I'm getting involved with here in Washington around blockchain. I will bring that to the group once that is available. Digital Town and Life ID were both there, got incredible feedback from them. I know we're not doing updates from the portfolio companies or potential portfolio companies on this call anymore, so I do want to set up a 1-hour call for Digital Town, not just to talk about their platform, but a very wide range of opportunities to build DApps on that, and what the opportunities can be for members to participate in that, as well as building things. I have 3 investor meetings this week. I did 5 interviews last week, and yeah, I think we need to do one of these a month because this is fantastic for business and really, incredibly reinvigorated. And then as I share snippets with people in industry and at the conferences that I'm speaking at or interviews, everybody wants to know. Everybody is incredibly excited about Archain, and now they are very closely following the releases. I did talk to the airport industry again this morning, and we will be continuing to follow up and look for proof of concept. So that's me.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Greg, are you up?
I am. I'm here. Thank you. I guess just sort of to reiterate what everybody's been talking about, the developer conference was huge for us, and we were lucky enough to have our entire team there, but even more fortunate to have 24 portfolio companies that came. I think we even got more than we thought we were going to have. The response from the folks that were there was just phenomenal. So again, and I've shared it with you, Greg, and with Nash and Matt and the whole team, how important that was, and especially to them, so that they could see that the technology is actually real and that it is being developed and who the people are that are doing it, and to know the monumental task that's ahead of us. They all mentioned that, but that this is the team, if anybody's going to do it, can pull it off. So that was really encouraging to hear all of that. Of course, it led to a lot more deal flow. We were excited to be able to present sort of how Reflective works. So David and Renal and I got to stand in front of the audience and talk about how we take on deals and what companies should look for. So I'm super excited once Christian gets those videos edited down and we can post that so everybody can see in case they miss that. So out of that week, we've got 5 companies that are signing this week or the early part of next week. All of them were at the developer conference. We have 3 new companies that came in this week. We've got 6 of additional teed up for the following, just so the community knows, and folks on this call, the way that we work at Reflective is every Wednesday morning Pacific time is when we go through with the whole team all the new deals that come in. We have each of them put themselves into sort of a summary sheet that we go through with all 8 team members to figure out who can work on what, if they've heard of the deal before, and we talk for 5 or 10 minutes about each one, and then we decide at that point whether it moves forward or not. So anybody that's on the call that knows anybody that's interested in being involved with Reflective, if they can get their deals to us by the first part of that week, that's when we will review. So we can't just pop a deal in on a Thursday or a Friday. We're getting too much deal flow, which is a good thing. So we've got that system in place. That's kind of how we work at Reflective. This week, I had a great talk at the University of Washington here in Seattle. So I got a chance to be in front of the graduate students actually in the communications, the social media, and the marketing department. So all of them are wondering the best way to figure out how to storytell and write about the blockchain specifically. It was shocking to see in a room of that size. I don't know, there were 60 or 70 people there maybe. Only 2 or 3 of them knew anything significant about blockchain, but they were all interested enough to attend. So those are the people, in my opinion, we have to get trained on this to get out there and be the evangelizers to what we're doing. So that was great. 2 team members, Renal and Shahan, are headed to Boston as we speak to speak to the Harvard blockchain folks. I think they're making a stop into MIT as well, so they're doing that over the next few days. Our big event in San Francisco is happening next week on the 3rd with the Berkeley blockchain folks. Greg M is coming down to speak at that one, so we're super excited about that. That's next Thursday on the 3rd. And then we're going to be in New York for Consensus, and we're hosting an event on the 15th. And so we've got that going. We're also getting busy enough that we're looking for an executive assistant / office manager as we get close to the office being open. So I would encourage anybody that might know somebody that's in the Seattle area or willing to come here to help us out there. We'll take a look at their qualifications and resume. So please send that forward. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. That was an excellent update as well. I'm very, very excited to get more involvement with the University of Washington. I really want to. I'd love to have some engagement, closer to home rather than having to hop on a plane all the way to Paris.
No kidding. I mean, our motto is sort of like own your hometown first, right? Like we need to own this city first, and we've got great hooks. And it shouldn't be that hard. I feel like, God, we're in San Francisco, New York more than we're here, and it's happening. We're putting together a great group of thought leaders in Seattle that actually the first meeting's happening today to get that pushed out. And the University of Washington is playing a big part of that. They're not necessarily the easiest university to work with. But I learned something from the Berkeley blockchain guys came to the dev conference, and they are very excited to sort of put their program and package, because I've probably the most successful one of any of the universities in the country. They want to package that up and help universities like the University of Washington or any of the universities that you all have in your neighborhoods to figure out how to do this, because quite frankly, UW has done it wrong. Berkeley's done it right, so I'm going to pair them together to figure out how we can push this out, and it'll benefit all of us. So
that's fantastic. Actually, do you mind if I mention some of the highlights of our conversation about your deal day in a box?
Please do so. Yes, please.
Okay, all right. So Greg and I have a weekly update call, and Greg was talking about this idea of getting more community involvement in the diligence and deal flow around around the Archain companies that we're trying to get to build on the platform. And I was excited by his idea of not just doing that in one city, but to do that in a location-based way, where this kind of event could happen in cities around the world, and that one of the things that we talked about was getting community partnership on investments. So it's not just Reflective Ventures, but community members could invest directly in deals that they want to support. And one of the things that was obvious that sort of emerged as an obvious amplification of the idea was to have a smart contract. I mean, literally, you could have an address that's available for participation in investment, present at the time that a company is giving their pitch, and community members could simply send funds directly to that address, to show their support. So that's it's a little bit pie in the sky. There's some details to be worked out. It's a nice it's a nice kind of image. The other thing that we talked about that is not just taking it upscale, but also taking it downscale. So think about a similar kind of thing, but for much smaller projects, right? So a town hall kind of meeting in which different local groups within a particular municipality might propose efforts that they want to take on as a group. So maybe one group says, all the traffic circles in the all the roundabouts, the little areas there need to be cleaned up and freshened up, maybe some flowers planted and that kind of thing. And so a group can say, well, we're the group to do this. This is our game plan, and this is how much it's going to cost. and then community members within that local community could again contribute to the projects they wanted to support directly. So I think this idea has nice scaling power, right? It can scale up and scale down, and it's really about, you know, how do we get the community engaged and involved in supporting projects that improve our lives, improve our communities, and that makes the network stronger. So I really liked Greg's idea, and I think it has a lot of power. Any more you want to say about that, Greg? Did I get it right?
No, I think you nailed it. It's a bit ambitious, and you know, we're trying to do 8,000 things at once, but that's one of the things that I'm passionate about, and we will make it happen. So if anybody likes that idea and what we're thinking on that and has more thoughts to it, I encourage them to reach out to us. We're just formulating it now, so it's a perfect time to get involved.
Awesome, very good. So I noticed that Kent joined. If we'll circle back now and get a little update on the two sharding proposals. Kent, are you ready to speak to that?
Sure. So I guess just up front, I think we've already settled on the last model, but this is more of just a summary of what we talked about, or what the consensus team talked about during the Boulder conference. And let me just share my screen.
By the way, I'm not sure that it's completely settled.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay, fair. So basically there are two different sharding models on the table. Actually, Vlad has sort of proposed what I would say a mix, but essentially there's one which is the tree model. This one is where you have merge blocks, and essentially, you know, you have a root and everything is sort of aligned, or the structure of the sharding solution is a tree. And well, I guess the nice thing about the tree model is that, well, you can do atomic transactions speculatively. I'm just going to go down the list here. And well, because you have merge blocks, you don't have to keep track of what receipts, or like when you send over code, you don't actually have to keep track of what you sent over. It's either included in the merge block or it isn't. The merge block can be accepted or not based on the gas price that is offered inside it. And so this is sort of, there's the ability for the higher shard to reject it or not based on the gas price here. And well, for any region A, if you're validating that, you just have to validate from there up to the root. So then the big downside is that if you're essentially, if you're on a lower shard and you want to finalize something, it's going to take a while, because you have to essentially create a merge block that gets finalized with a higher shard. And that higher shard also needs to produce a merge block that finalizes it with another higher shard. And then you have to keep going up to the top. There's, of course, the direct path of, you know, if you're the lower shard, you can directly merge a mine block, or mine a merge block with the top shard. And so, you know, in some fashion, you need to get a merge block mined with the top before your lower shard is truly finalized. We're still sort of looking into this, whether we can just have it such that only lower shards can push merge blocks to higher shards. This might allow for sort of an easier finalization path, so to speak. But yeah, that's the tree model. So the other option is to have this lattice model, and I guess the lattice describes the structure of it, but the other part is that there are no merge blocks. And in this model, you effectively need to finalize when you're sending code over. And essentially, the receiver code will always check to see that the sender has finalized whatever it's sending over. And there needs to be rules regarding whether or not the receiver can reject what gets sent over to it. And I think the sort of current best thing we have is that, well, we can actually reject that, or we have to have some sort of fixed conditions such that, for example, like the sender needs to send over this much gas with the transaction or else we can't run it. And so, this requires, so we're still thinking of a receipt tracking scheme. Maybe Kyle can speak to that if he's on this call. But just keep going. And yeah, there's the nice thing about this lattice model though is that, well, we don't actually have to wait. We don't have to push everything to the top shard in order to finalize a block. We can do it sort of each namespace is more independent in some sense in this model because they finalize things and then send them over. Like I think like the simple summary of these two models is that, well, one sort of makes atomicity a lot easier, but makes finalization slower. And then the lattice model makes finalization faster, but it has all these sort of kinks in terms of having to get atomicity for code mobility.
Yeah, that's a nice characterization. The other thing that we have been sort of poking at with respect to the lattice model is that there's the consistency on the row VM transitions needs to be watched over by a larger portion of the network than just the validators in a particular region. So that makes it that's not as nice as we would like to see it. But thank you very much for that. If people want more details, Kent has this nice write-up. Kent, can you place the link to the write-up in the chat for people who are interested?
Already done.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Awesome. Okay.
How does this model prevent double spends?
So I'm sorry, how does which model?
The lattice model.
So the way well, I'll let Kent speak to that since he's the presenter here.
Yeah. So essentially the way you can double spend, for example, is if you're okay. So let me back up a bit. If you're just spending within the same namespace, then it's sort of traditional rules, right? As long as you don't if you create a fork within the same namespace, and then you manage to convince the other person that your fork is real when it actually isn't, then that's how you get a double spend. And so the way you prevent that is, well, just through the regular Casper protocol. You can't convince someone that one side of the fork is the main one or will be the real one if there is another fork going on. And that's sort of nothing to do with namespaces. But when you involve namespaces, there is the trickier issue is that when you send over code across namespaces, you have to ensure that it's not sent over twice. And that's sort of another way that a double spend could occur, specific to when you have multiple namespaces. And so you have to keep track of, so this is the receipt tracking scheme I was talking about earlier. Like you have to somehow ensure that code that is sent over is not included twice. And a sort of another component to that is that if you're trusting code that comes from another namespace, you have to ensure that everything in that namespace was done correctly, in the sense that you could have a different type of attack where everyone, or like a group of validators in one namespace, decides to do some illegal rewrite rules to, you know, increase their rev balances as a group, and then they become, like, as a whole, a malicious namespace that is minting new revs. And so what Greg was saying earlier about, you know, we have to keep watching various namespaces to ensure that they're not doing these illegal rewrite rules is, you know, to prevent a double spend effectively. And so, yeah, we need to come up with a sort of covering scheme where we can make sure that there are no namespaces that are able to increase rev balances and do stuff that would effectively be a double spend.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. So again, there's still work to be done. I think the team is well apprised of the trade-offs, and we're hoping to have the decision on this nailed down by early next week, so that we can report the decision by next hangout. That's the aim and the goal. But I wanted the community to be apprised of that. I think that gives us lots of wiggle room in terms of meta schedule. All right, so unless there are any more questions, moving along to some other significant updates. Let me see here, hang on a second. I've got something I wanna show people. Gotta pull it out of the right pocket here. Here we go. There. I don't know if I've shown this before, but this is the key to our new building. We've got we have a move-in date a little after the middle of May, and we're going to be having a party to head over to Costco and get pallets of toilet paper and the office supplies and stuff like that to supply the building. It turns out Jonathan Kochmer has also a bunch of office furniture and recording gear, so we can set up a nice audio component to support the work that Christian is doing. Additionally, in the space, we already, as I've mentioned before, we're going to do a deal with Kent Baki, who is a founder of La Marzocca. We will be paying Rox to get a La Marzocca machine for the house. And then we will be hosting coffee clatches on a regular basis, either monthly or quarterly, but some kind of regular basis where we get both local and not so local business leaders to come sit down, have a cup of espresso with us, and talk about blockchain and how it affects their business. So that will be another series of communications to try to help people understand what the blockchain is and how it can support and support the transformation the businesses are already undergoing. So very, very excited about that. And then on the heels of that, what we're sort of socializing the idea that we have a conference to launch and announce several things. And this time it will be in Berlin in August. The main thing that we'll be supporting is the launch of testnet. So that we're shooting to have that live in August. And we want a conference to support that. There will be some other things that we'll be announcing in that time frame. So the aim is to get rchain.coop.eu up and running in that time frame, and to have the formal launch of the European Center of rChain based in Berlin as a Genossenschaft in August. And then also we would like to formally christen the the ARChain Resonate shared space in that time frame. We're hoping, hoping, I don't know if this will come true, that we will, someone is, I think, maybe washing dishes. If they could, if they could mute, I'd appreciate it. So that we can also announce the formal research partnerships with a number of the researchers that we have spoken to back in March. And to that end, we now have a little group that involves that includes Mike Stay, Kenny Rowe, Eitan Chatav, Joe Denman, Lilia, and myself, who are basically forming the core of the ARChain research group. And so that's we'll be setting up a web page for ARChain research on top of embedded or meshed in the ARChain co-op web pages until we get the organization a little more on its own feet, and then it'll manage its own web resources. So very excited about all those developments. So that's quite a few. Let me stop there and check in and see if anybody has any questions about that.
Yeah, I have a few questions actually. So the conference in Berlin, number one, that's not going to conflict with Burning Man, is it? Because Burning Man's at the end of the month.
Burning Man's at the end of August. Yeah,
Good,
exactly.
great.
So
Okay.
shouldn't conflict. That's right.
Second question is this is the office for the ARChain co-op that you're moving into, right? Not the developer like community house or whatever you're calling this in West Seattle, right? Or is it both?
No. It is that is they are one and the same.
Okay, so I mean, here's a question for you, because I still, and anybody on the call knows like property managers in Seattle. I'm looking for a place. I'm trying to move out there. So if you need help that week, Greg, like I could fly out to help.
Oh, that'd be great.
Know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
yes.
yeah. And sort of test run that, because I mean I would have to stay at a hotel to look for a place in Seattle. You know what I mean? So
yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean for those kinds of short-term stays, it's ideal. One thing that I need to make the community aware of, that the board has been of one mind that we don't want to be a landlord. we don't want to take on the legal liabilities there. So it's perfectly reasonable for people to come and use the resource to stay for a few days, but much longer than that, would require sort of special arrangements. So that's just an FYI. What else were you saying, Christian?
No, that's it. I mean, if I can come up, in that, I guess it's the middle of the month. I can fly back to Seattle and meet you guys out there and help that move, and get the place up and running, and then stay there just for a few days and try to find a place to sign, so I can move to Seattle by hopefully the beginning of it would be beginning of June, hopefully.
Awesome. That's fantastic. That works out very well. Very good. Okay. Any other questions, comments about any or all of that?
Yes, Greg.
Yes.
Regarding the espresso machine.
Yes.
I probably should take a look at the new place, because this machine has electrical requirements. It needs 220, for instance.
Yeah.
And it has to be plumbed in, and also just the location of it. I've done hundreds of hours of that kind of thing with espresso machines, and just to take a look would help, I think.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I can. The current occupants are, like I said, they're still there. We don't want to be too disruptive to them, but I can go back to the real estate agent and negotiate a time when we can go through. And yeah, absolutely, no problem.
And I have a little bit of an update with regards to coffee.
Oh, go for it.
I met with Tim O'Connor, who was at the meeting that we had at La Marzocco. I don't know if you remember him. He was the guy next to me, very quiet, but he was the one who actually paid attention. So always a good thing. And they had the big SCAA conference, which is the International Coffee Deal. And kind of on a chance, I called him because I had some questions to ask him about a coffee thing I'm trying to put together. And so we met, and what we came up with is a way of coming up with coffee for the co-op. He roasts in Santa Cruz, but he's here half the time and in Santa Cruz the rest of the time. And he's very interested actually in hooking us up with Pete's. This is separate from what we're doing, but just as a possible venture, because that's Pete's is now part of the second largest coffee company in the world. Kind of a mixed blessing in a way. But anyway, so Tim was one of the ones that was interested in cryptocurrency and kind of latched onto it. So I had a long chat with him. And then also I'm meeting with Kent later this week. So I'll try to get the particulars worked out.
Excellent. Very good. That's a great update. Yeah, I very much want to see these kinds of I don't want to say commodities, but these kinds of day-to-day goods and services on the blockchain. I think that's very much in alignment with what I've been saying all along, that if we get the last mile first, then we've won.
Plus, we have the one legal drug,
Well, they're two and a half, right? So yeah, that's great. That's great news. Okay, so the one other thing I just want to give an update. I think we mentioned this before, but it bears mentioning again. We have decided to form a marketing entity that's its own organization, and then the marketing budget that was associated with the proposal that the board approved will be funded by all of the parties that are going to enjoy the benefits of the marketing. So there will be a joint marketing effort that includes all of both the venture firms, Pyrofex, and the co-op. And so we'll be collecting our efforts to get more bang for buck. And I'm very excited. Patrick is heading that up as director of communications. He'll have the responsibility to make sure to collect all the input and make sure that any marketing message that goes out is in alignment with co-op goals and co-op values. And I think the other thing that's very important here is that we are demonstrating the other side of decentralization. It's one thing to have a bunch of autonomous organizations, sort of all scattered out there, but they need to be able to work together if decentralization is going to be effective. So I think this is one of those times where we get to prove to the community that we know how to work together at this larger level, and I'm very, very excited. It seems like it's coming together pretty well, given the rate and the pace of progress, and I think it's remarkably effective. Is Patrick on the call? Let's see, I can't tell. There are a lot of people here. Patrick, you want to give your 2 cents here?
Yeah. First of all, it was great and inspiring to be in those conversations in the actual Boulder conference. Since then, we're still ironing out like kind of the operational details and the legal structure behind that. But we've already started to onboard some talent. We're doing a test run with a developer that's going to help us kind of audit the onboarding process. He's completely green to our chain, and in fact, fairly green to crypto. And what he's going to be doing is just going from zero to hello world, auditing that process and explaining how he believes we can improve that. That's one of the things that is already underway. Our intentions are to build out a team in the next 2 weeks of part-timers, and then kind of explore and work out those relationships in order to build up from there. Thanks for all the support from, all the partner organizations in helping to get this done. It's already all gearing up and ready to go. So lots of work to be done.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that update. I think one of the other things that we're currently looking to do is to get a hybrid model where we tap into the for the co-op branding and for the ArtChain branding. So we want to get this hybrid model where we tap into the collective intelligence of the community, but we also bring in some high-powered consultants who kind of knocked it out of the park, more times than you can shake a stick at. To mix as many metaphors as possible.
Yeah, I didn't even mention that side of the update. That's been underway for quite some time now, and our intention is to finalize that by early next week, and then we'll have a proposal of the actual, like what we're calling the branding working group, and our way that we intend to interface between the high-powered leadership group as well as the community, so that we can mature as an organization together, as well as create this effective pattern language of an ArtChain brand. So I'm super excited for that.
I'm glad you mentioned that. So one of our intentions with respect to brand is not to come up with just a single brand, but to come up with what Patrick was mentioning, a pattern language, whereby with the elements of this pattern, different organizational entities, businesses, startups, even research groups can use the pattern language to develop a brand, so that it becomes easy to spot when something is an ArtChain company or an ArtChain organization. You just recognize it because you can see the design elements, you can see the design sensibilities, and you can see the way the values are represented within the design. So that it becomes so that there's a kind of consistency within the ArtChain community, even though there's individuality and autonomy. So that's a goal that we're aiming for with respect to this branding, and I think it has the potential to be quite powerful. And certainly the branding folks that we spoke to were excited about this idea. Okay. Any questions about the marketing effort?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So for the branding stuff, like like I was showing, I think a few people in Boulder, like I'm a fan of personally the more like Japanese aesthetic, with like in terms of like modern graphic design. So like if I were to like make a proposal, of like, hey, I think that we can contact this firm, this like graphic design firm in Japan, and like for X amount of dollars, can they take a stab at branding? Like, could the marketing organization like potentially fund that? You know what I mean?
It's possible. I mean, again, the dialogue. So we've done like a 3 or 4 month search on branding firms for graphic design and that kind of thing. And so there's been a winnowing process, and we're now down to just like 1 or 2.
Right.
So
I hear what you're saying. It's you have to pull a trigger, right? You can't just
go
on and on.
Yeah.
But like, it's a constant evolution is what I'm saying. It never stops. So
yes, agreed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what the marketing organization is set up to take care of. Is to,
Oh,
go ahead.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but to that point, Christian, there's definitely an ongoing need for like continued graphic collateral, and it still is to be determined like if the aesthetic we want is more of a Japanese style. So once we engage the community and kind of have those options, if that is what we choose, then it would make sense to figure out like an engagement for something like that for ongoing work. So that's not out of the picture at all. But right now is this like high level type of storytelling, messaging, and that nature that will inform the rest. But I would, I'll ping you and get you involved in those conversations, definitely. And we'll, to the community at large also.
Well said, Patrick. I can see why you're director of communications. So I just want to, I know we're at the top of the hour here, but I just want to now talk a little bit about the Rock to Rev conversion. So right now, the proposal that was sketched out and is on film and on YouTube for Rock to Rev conversion was presented very nicely by Nash Foster at the developer conference. I'll give a quick summary. The proposal that we would like to follow is that we're going to find a particular block height on the Ethereum blockchain, at which point we won't be we won't be looking at changes of balance. The only thing we're hoping is that by particular block height, every quantity of rock that's stored in a smart contract as opposed to an address, and that includes multi-sigs, are moved into an address. And then we'll take us that snapshot, and that we will expect the community to review that snapshot and make sure that we haven't missed anything or we haven't misrepresented anything. So it's all eyes on this from the community. Then with a frozen sort of chain state, that will be transferred to the ARChain Genesis block. So that when the Genesis block launches, there will be address balance taken from the Ethereum blockchain. Because of our namespace proposal, your public key private key pairs should just work as they have in the past. So you can use your existing keys to get to your rev balances on the ARChain network. So what this does is it limits the co-op's exposure. It means there's less in the way of moving parts, and it makes and it puts the burden back onto the community. Pay attention. And in particular, there will be all kinds of potential phishing exploits that could happen around this. So we need the community to help step up and talk about what the official approach is and how it works. Now, as a part of this process, we'll need to publish the block height. So Nash has a very good idea where we reveal bits of the block height over a period of time. So there will be a web page where people can go and see how many bits of the block height have been revealed, and so there'll be more and more information about the block height where we take the snapshot. So again, the community will get a kind of countdown or a ticker to find that block height and know that by that time they need to have made sure that the balances reflect their holdings. And things are not squirreled away in smart contracts or including multi-sigs. So again, we need people to work on behalf of the community to get this out to the world that this is what we intend to follow. Any questions or comments about the Rock to Rev conversion?
So Greg, with that, obviously some of that won't make it over into the ARChain network. Could this fulfill the requirement the co-op has to quote burn rock?
Again, the co-op doesn't have any requirements at this point to burn rock. We burned rock at the AMP redemption process, but there's no further requirement to burn rock. But with respect to stuff not making it over, our hope is that everything, that if this goes off without a hitch, right? Everybody goes over. We're going to spend a lot of time making sure that everyone is whole, and there are some processes that are set aside to deal with special cases. But in general, what we would like this to do is to go off without a hitch. So we're really asking all hands on deck because this is sort of the point of maximal hazard for the co-op. We need to make sure that this goes off without a hitch. But what did you mean by a requirement to burn rock?
From last October's meeting.
Oh, yeah, right. But that was never made actionable, unfortunately. Yeah. So
the number wasn't. That's correct.
Right. So the number could be 0, and then.
That's right.
Yes. So I'm looking at that proposal and vote outcome as the co-op learning how to be to state their resolutions more clearly. It's a learning process. We have to have resolutions that are actionable. But yeah, so I mean, if it turns out that, you know, this could be, certainly that could be an opportunity whereby we discharge that obligation in some way, shape, or form. I mean, the reality, you know, as you mentioned in the last discussion, is that 800 million rev is nowhere near the kind of token supply that we need. It certainly doesn't even match, you know, an economy the size of California, and we're trying to we're trying to make this be a global economy. So the token supply that we're talking about here is far short of what's necessary to have a practical economy at scale, and the co-op will have to address that in the not too distant future. But for now, we'll go with the supply that we've got. Cool. Any other questions?
I'm concerned that we have victims. I mean, you know, if we don't want to have any victims, then rocks would always be good for revs. Now, how do we justify that?
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a good question. The problem is that it leaves us open to all kinds of exposure, especially if there are phishing scams, right? So people could go back to the community and just change a conversion process. Let's say, for example, a smart contract driven conversion process, just change it slightly, just modify an address. And now someone sends their rocks to a modification, this slightly modified version of a conversion, a smart contract driven conversion process. And suddenly their rocks are stolen. And now, because, you know, it's always good rocks for rev, then the fisher goes back to the co-op and does the conversion. And, you know, and now the co-op is exposed.
So one thing I saw one company do before their ICO was they bought up like 150 domains.
So that's just a kind of protection measure. It's a good idea for sure. But it's not a like the thing that a lot of what we're concerned about is in language regions where the co-op doesn't have expertise, like in Korea, for example. So someone could go into Korea, carry out a fishing expedition. It would be very hard for the co-op with all of its resources to catch this, because none of us is expert in Korean at this point.
Right, exactly.
So we have to be as diligent as possible. We have to get the word out and, you know, have everyone point to this. But Jim, have I answered your question? Do you understand our concern?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're almost 10 minutes past the hour. Unless there are any other burning questions, I need to jump over to another meeting. Going once. Going twice. Sold.
Dev conference.
Indeed. Okay, guys, we'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.